I had a teacher who said, you're a designer. Everything around you is designed by other designers. You can design the world you live in. I met Joe, my co-founder, and both of us had this dream that we were gonna do something that would make an impact in the world. We didn't even know what that meant. I got this job at an industrial design firm in Los Angeles that had health insurance. My life felt a little bit like I was in a car, and the road in front, it's like you look out of a car, and the road in front of you looks exactly like the road behind you. And you're like, that's your life. And something about that really terrified me. Joe had been calling me up to try to get me to start a company, and then one day I go into work and I quit my job. I'm living in a house in Los Angeles with 3 friends, and I tell them I'm leaving Los Angeles. And I pack everything in the back of an old Honda Civic, a foam mattress, $1,000 in the bank account, hardly any savings or any money. I have to pursue the dreams. I'd rather fail doing something I love than always wonder what could have been. We tried to raise $150,000 and sell 10% of the company. That would have been an amazing deal. And we got introduced to more than a dozen investors. Most of the investors we got introduced to didn't even return phone calls or emails. A few of them wrote back and say, this is not something we're interested in. And the very few that met us did not give us money. We're Airbnb and breakfast. The Airbnbs aren't working, maybe the breakfast will work. So we decided, let's sell collectible breakfast cereal. Obama O's, the breakfasts of change. And then we also came up with a John McCain themed cereal. We ended up making 1,000 boxes of cereal. We sold them for $40 a box, and we made almost $30,000. And this is how we funded the company. Before that, we were funding the company on credit cards. I don't know if you know those binders you put baseball cards in, kids with baseball, we put credit cards in those. We had sleeves of credit cards. I would go to sleep and I'd wake up kind of like, and my heart would be pounding. And I'd be like, oh my God, like, how did I get myself in this situation? I have no money. Like, we launched a year ago, we still have no customers, and people don't like the idea, and what are we gonna do? Like, now what? I kept saying, now what? And like, when is this gonna happen? And then you get the courage over the course of the day. And you'd find a new plan, and you'd get through the day, and you go to sleep confident. You're like, you know what? It's gonna be fine. And tomorrow's a new day. And you go to sleep, and you wake up, and you're like, oh my God, and then your heart starts pounding again. We had launched 3 times. We launched, no one used it, we launched again. And a year later, we have almost no customers, tons of credit card debt, and every investor we knew said no. Many people have asked me, why? Well, why didn't you lose hope at that point? And I guess I just believed in the idea. And we believed that if people could experience what we'd experienced, then this would be an idea that would spread. And they just needed to experience it. It would just take more time. One of the most common things people say when they hear about the idea of Airbnb now, and they see people all over the world doing it, is, why didn't I think of that? It's such a simple idea. Why didn't I think of that? You might not have thought of that. It's because when we thought about that years ago, the most common thing people said is, are you nuts?
I think in society, we often stigmatize mistakes. Like when you take a test at school, to get an A means to not get anything wrong. And there's a right answer. And the problem with startups is there's this weird power curve where it actually doesn't matter how many things you get wrong, so long as the things you get wrong aren't fatal, and that you get a couple things right. And those couple things that are really right and really big. And so I'm trying to think of the analogy. I don't know, maybe baseball is popular I don't know if it's so popular in France, but imagine like the game baseball. If you change the rules where a home run was equivalent to like 1,000 runs, not 1 run. And if that was the case, every single person would be swinging for home runs, and they wouldn't care how many times they struck out. It would be worth striking out repeatedly, because if you just hit a home run, you got like 1,000 runs. That's actually kind of how startups are. And so the main thing that we tried to do is make a lot of mistakes, learn from mistakes very quickly, and be able to understand the difference between fatal mistakes and non-fatal mistakes. And when you're a startup, pretty much like nothing kills you except running out of money. In fact, Paul Graham used to tell us, startups don't die of homicide, they die of suicide. In other words, it's very rare that like another company will kill you. Like that's actually how most of these companies fade away. And they specifically fade away from like actually they just like kind of run out of money or they lose motivation. I'd never heard of a small startup that got killed by competition. I think large companies do, but I've never heard of a small company die of competition. And so I think just like the biggest mistake I've seen people make is probably just like not taking enough chances early on. But I guess some other things I would say that I do witness a lot of mistakes. We made some of these. I'll give you a couple tips. When you hire your first employee, you should ask yourself, do I want 10 more people like them? Because you're going to have 10 more people like them, because you're going to empower them to hire other people, and you're going to want to include them in decisions. So number one, when you hire your first employee, ask, do you want 10 more like them? And so I think you'd be very, very thoughtful. You're not just hiring skills, you're hiring people. I would make sure when you're building a product that you actually do attempt to do things that don't scale, that you work backwards from an ideal use case.
The big lesson, Lenny, the other thing we learned is to create a great guest experience, you need great hosts. And to have great hosts, you need great tools. And so if you want to create a great experience for guests, it often starts with building great tools for hosts to enable them to provide a great experience for guests. And so that was one of the theories behind the listing tab, is we're going to build great tools for hosts. They're going to love it. And we also felt like if we put care in design of our app, that hosts are going to see that, and that they're going to actually put care into hosting even more than they already do. And they do put a lot of care in now. As you know, there was a saying inside of Airbnb. It was add a zero at the end, which is to imagine something an order of magnitude bigger. The exercise isn't necessarily to say, if people say they want to hit a goal, I say, okay, I added a zero, and you have to hit that goal. It's more the exercise of what would it take to be 10x bigger or do something 10 times better. Because what you find is when you push people, they will sometimes think about the problem differently. And so the role of a leader is to see potential in people that they may not even see themselves. And when I tell somebody it's not good enough, either I'm saying you're not good enough, or I believe that you have more potential than you're showing me. So in other words, you can push a team and they can feel demoralized because they can feel like what they're doing is not good enough if they have a fixed mindset. Or you create a growth mindset organization where the more I'm involved, the more I say you can do better, it's because the more I believe in you and I know that you have more in you. And the way to know if a team could do better is if their life depended on it, could they do it? I think the job of a leader is not to make it life and death, that's too far, but to be able to motivate a team to see potential in them that they don't see in themselves and to really push them, to set a tempo, to break something down to first principle thinking. And if you do that, then I think that's going to be the opposite of these slow moving, kind of soul crushing bureaucracies.
I knew a lot of people who started companies who didn't care about culture. And when they looked at what I was doing and what Joe was doing, what Nate was doing, they thought we were wasting our time. They said, like, you should be building your product. You should be growing. What are you doing, like, building a culture? Like, how does the customer benefit? Like, you're wasting your time. The reason that we spend so much time on culture is it's kind of like this high-cost problem. Culture is a shared way that you all do things, so you should think really, really long-term. Well, the thing that endures in companies is the culture, because the culture is like the source of innovation, the shared way of doing things. That's a source of all future creation, all future innovation. And so Airbnb, we created the original product, but eventually the culture attracts a certain type of person that creates all future products for you.
But then you get past some peak, where you go into this trough where you realize, oh my God, the moment you get to some frontier of knowledge, you start to become a beginner again. And everything is new. And so I think the first thing I try to do is to be a beginner. You know, Pablo Picasso had a saying, he said, it took me 4 years to learn to paint like Raphael, but a lifetime to learn to paint like a child. And so I've tried to always see the world through the eyes of a child. And I think one of the key characteristics of a child is curiosity, to see everything with fresh eyes, to not have too many judgments. Like when I was trying to figure out how to run a company, I studied the history of divisional organizations, and I studied Steve Jobs, but also studied like what Bill Gates did, and I studied like Alfred Sloan at General Motors that MIT Sloan is named after. So I try to like understand the sources of things. I try to learn. I try to be shameless about reaching out to help. I think that a lot of people are afraid to reach out to help because they think other people are busy. The biggest honor most people get in their lives, or one of the biggest honor, is when other people ask them for help, because we all just want to feel useful. So don't feel ashamed to reach out to something for help. It actually, it gives a lot of them great honor. And I think you don't need to reach out to people 10 years ahead of you. They can just be people a year ahead of you. In fact, an entrepreneur getting started, I might be less useful than somebody 2 years ahead of them that knows like the latest distribution channels that I like kind of have forgotten. So I think that that is the key. It's learning, it's growing, it's curiosity. It's constantly having that hunger and that fire to always want to be better, to remember, to feel like I haven't made it yet.